Hi guys, how are you doing? Hope you guys are doing okay. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much guys for supporting my channel and always coming back to check on your girl. The topic of today is things to consider before moving to Australia. So and probably this might even work for be a good video for people who are planning to move abroad, not necessarily Australia, but just moving away from your country and moving to a new country and calling the new country your home. So there are a few things that you might want to consider and you might want to think about, because relocating is not easy. Relocating is one of the toughest things that I think I've seen. And at the same time, while it's difficult to relocate, sometimes it's worth the struggle and it's worth the time that you spend thinking through things and planning. I'll talk about a few things that I've written down. And number one, one thing that I have mentioned is, if you have a stable job where you are, you might want to think about if you really want to move to another country. The reason why I think this is very vital or it's important is because if, for example, in your country you have a very well-paying job, a career that is your dream job, and maybe you went to school and studied for many years or whatever number of years you studied, and you have acquired this job and you're happy, you feel happy, but then for some reason you have just realized that you would want to move, or maybe you have had there's somewhere where there's greener pastures, and actually just being on that point, the reason people move, you might want to ask yourself, why are you moving? People move for different reasons. There are people who will move for education. There are people who will move for greener pastures. There are people who will move maybe to give their children a good education or a good lifestyle. So consider yourself, do you really want to move? Your current living standard, your current job, your current environment, are you happy? Do you think you're going to be more happier when you move? This is the reason I'm saying this, is because if you have a good job in your country and you're considering moving to a new country, remember, most of the countries, not all the countries will just accept your education and give you the job that you had previously from your country. They will not even, for example, Australia. For example, if you're a doctor in Kenya or let's say Uganda and you come here as a doctor, the chances of you getting straight into being a doctor, into getting the registration to becoming a doctor straight away is the chances are very low. And therefore you might want to think about that, because some of the jobs, if here you will need the registration, therefore that would mean you will go back, you maybe have to go back to school, get their education. For example, here in Australia, they will not give you as a registered nurse, they will not give you straight away a position to work in a hospital immediately from, let's say, Kenya. Therefore you will have to come here, go back to school and get a little bit of their education, so that you're considered viable to apply for the registration in Australia. So just think about that. And then the other thing that you might want to think about is, when you relocate, let's say you have children, if you relocate with your children, you have to think about their schooling. Have you even checked for school? Have you gotten a school admission for them? And then remember, different visas will grant your children different for example, if you're on a student visa, your kids will have to pay school fees as an international student, and that is very costly. So if you're paying for yourself and then at the same time you're paying for your children, you might that might be a little bit strenuous unless you have a lot of money saved. And then just you might also think about settling in. How are you going to get housing? You have a family. If you have a family, it might even be more difficult to get a house, because you need to get a house that is conducive for a family. You want to get a house that is maybe close to the school that your kids will be going. You want to get a house that is in a good suburb. And then compared to if you're coming alone, you might even go to a hostel, you might live in an Airbnb, you might live in shared accommodation. But then if you have family, you have kids and partner, it might be difficult for you to go to live in a shared accommodation. Therefore, you will have to think a little bit outside the box before you even think of relocating. You have to arrange for all this, and sometimes arranging for accommodation while you're still overseas might be a little bit difficult, because here you might want to go and most of the housing agents, they want you to come and inspect the house so that they are sure that they are not dealing with a robot. You have to go and inspect the house, and then you have to apply for the house, and they will give you a go-ahead. Therefore, if you're overseas, this might be a little bit difficult, and you might want to really consider if you have the money, maybe to live in a hotel for few months probably, or in an Airbnb that might be a little bit conducive for a family. The other thing you might want also to think about is in regards to education of your children, especially when you have small kids, very small kids that have not yet started going to school yet, but they need to go to daycare. So you might want to think about how are you going to really cater for the daycare expenses, because if, again, the same as the school going kids, if you're an international student, you need to remember that you do not get any subsidy for the daycare for the daycare for your kids. But if you're on a permanent resident visa or you're a citizen, you'll get a subsidy from the government. And to be honest, if you don't get a subsidy from the government for childcare, it is really costly. It is one of the most expensive things as a parent, I can tell you, I've seen in Australia. Childcare is really expensive. You can imagine if you're paying $150 a day for your child, and if, for example, you have 2 or 3, then that will be even more costly. So these are the things that you might need to really put consideration and think about them well. Might want to also think about is the health insurance. So especially if you have kids, remember it is very important to have health insurance. This is because, to be honest, kids will get sick anytime, and with the change of weather. So once you move to a different country, normally there's a change of climate and your kids might get sick. Not all the kids will get sick, but it is very important for you to have a health insurance, because if you don't have a health insurance, if you're supposed to pay for hospital bills from your pocket, that is really costly. Even ourselves who live here, we cannot afford to pay for health bills or hospital bills from our pockets. We have to have a hospital health insurance or a private health insurance. And then if you maybe have a permanent resident visa, therefore you get a Medicare, but Medicare which is from taxpayers' money. But then you have to remember, again, not everything is covered by that. Like insurance, the health Medicare will not cover for ambulance. I think it will not cover for dental. It will not cover for your eyes. It will not cover for ENT. Therefore, you have to pay from your pocket. So you might need to consider buying or getting yourself or your family a private health insurance to cover for the rest of the things or the rest of the services that are not offered by Medicare. I hope all this is clear, and I hope from when I started talking until now, you have started thinking through. because I know sometimes all we think is once you've gotten the visa, we think that, oh, everything is done, everything is ready. No, I think once you get the visa, and even before you get the visa, you need to start thinking about all this, because otherwise once you get here and you're not prepared enough, you might really get shocked, you might really get depressed, you might really get into crisis, because you can imagine you have come with kids and you've not arranged for all this, and let's say one of your kids or your children fall sick. To be honest, that is going to be very devastating. So it's important that you get prepared and think through this, all this. The other thing that you might need to consider is cost of living here. So cost of living in Australia is quite expensive. If I may compare it with Kenya, I'll compare with Kenya because that's the only other place I've lived apart from Australia. So cost of living here is a bit expensive. It is actually costly. I won't say a bit, it is very costly. So if, for example, housing, the rent is very expensive, the cost of groceries is very expensive, the bills are very expensive, the gas to fill your car is very expensive. So and once you come here, if you don't have a job, you have to think about how are you going to pay for your rent, how are you going to pay for food. So you might need some savings, especially if you have kids. That is very important. You might need savings so that at least before you get a job, you don't go hungry and you don't go through a lot of stress. And then the other thing you might want to think about is transportation. Think about how are you going to drop your kids to school. And it's not necessarily important to buy a car immediately you get here, unless you have money. And again, it will depend. Do you have a driver's license? So for now, I know Australia will accept international driver's license, especially from Kenya. I don't know what about other countries, but if you're coming from Kenya and you have an international driver's license, Australia, and specifically South Australia, will accept that, and you're able to drive here with your international license. So you might want to consider, how are you going to drop your kids to school? How are you going to work? Are you going to get a house when you're getting your house? Consider getting a house close to public transportation, so that at least that will make things easier for you and your family. So there are very many things that you need to consider before moving to Australia or moving to a different country. Therefore, guys, until there, I hope this video has been helpful. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. Remember to leave a comment. Remember to give me a thumbs up and ask questions. Let's interact on my comment section. Let me know what other things you would want me to talk about. And I will see you guys on my next video. Bye.